Welcome to Moments with Miss Amy. I'm so glad that you've joined me again today. And so today what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was dealing with things that seem like entirely like too enormous to be able to handle. And so I'm going to start it out. Remember in my last video I spoke about like sometimes there'll be some trauma that you're going to hear about? Well, that's what I'm going to talk a little bit right now. Is some of the trauma that I've gone through and just the different things I've gotten from it, what I've learned from it, and different suggestions. You may not be going through the exact same thing, and I pray that you're not. But whatever it is that you're going through, maybe some of the tidbits of what I've got will be strategies that will help you in dealing with what you're dealing with. So this story goes all the way back a number of years. Our children were younger, and my husband and I had received word that his father had passed away. So we loaded the kids up and we drove up to upstate New York, which is where my husband is from. And we drove up there and we stayed with his mom. They had been divorced for a number of years. And so we stayed with his mom and we would go back and forth to his father's house where we were taking care of things and preparing the house to be able to sell it and just going through his father's things. And I mean, it was a traumatic time. I mean, as you can understand, it's hard when you deal with the loss of someone. We walked into he had lived right up until the moment that he didn't. And so there was so much there to take care of. In fact, he had still been working at the time, and he had his own business and was a plumber and electrician. So we would go to his house. We would put in a number of hours, and then we would leave. Well, upstate New York, and it was literally around this time of year, honestly. And so it was cold, and it was snowy, and it was crazy up there. But we left Florida, drove up there. While we were up there, we would light a fire because he had a fireplace, and it was actually a wood burning stove, not an actual fireplace. And I loved, the fire. It was just something that was special. I grew up with having a wood burning stove throughout my life, and so I was very comfortable with it, very used to it. When we would go to his house to visit before he had passed, he would generally have the fire going unless it was straight up summertime, and I would be able to enjoy it. So it was kind of a comfort thing having it going, but it also helped us out because, like I said, it was literally cold up there. And so if we were outside playing in the snow with the kids or whatever, we could come in and get warmed up good and get our things dry. So anyways, so what had happened is one evening we were taking off after we'd been done working at the house throughout the day. So we'd had the fire going and stuff. And we were going to take off and we were leaving to go over to eat some dinner with some friends. So right before we left, I stocked the fire and there was a box there of kindling, and picking up the pieces of kindling and throwing it into the wood stove and stocking it up and getting it set so that it would stay burning, not a high burn, but just a good steady burn while we were gone. So when we came back, the home was still warm. And then we were going to finish up, pack up a few things, and then head back to my mother-in-law's house to stay. Well, we were gone, enjoyed our time with our friends. We drove back. When we drove back, we had my husband's mom with us because she had met us and, we'd done dinner together. And so it was my husband, myself, my mother-in-law, our daughter, Georgia, and our son, Michael. And we pulled in, and as we're pulling up closer to the house, it just didn't look right. Through the windows, we could see like an orange glow. When my husband and I walked in and came inside through the garage, as we came up to the door, on the other side of the door, we could see orange flames and the house was on fire on the inside. We're like, oh my gosh, like, what do we do? And of course we're calling 911 and getting the fire department there, but in the meantime, it's like, this is his dad's house. This is all of his stuff, like, how can it just all disappear just in a fire? Like, no, and so one of the crazy things that we did was my husband actually opened the door and reached in and grabbed a set of keys that was there that belonged to the truck that was parked right there in the garage next to where the house was on fire. And they were attached. It was an attached unit. And opened the garage door, backed the truck out of there, and we're outside, and Georgia gets out of the truck as well. She's standing there with us. My mother-in-law stayed in the truck with our little boy because Michael was quite small at this time. And we're just standing out there and we're just screaming and we're praying. And we're just screaming and praying, God, put this fire out. Please don't take all of this from us. Please, there's memories in there. There's things that are important to us. please put this fire out, Lord God, please stop it. And as you may have remembered, if you had listened to my previous video, I am a believer and I do believe in God and my family does. And so all of us were really screaming and praying. And at one point, like the fire started to go down and I kind of faltered a little bit, and I'm just like, even if it's not your will. And my daughter's just like, yo, Mom, pray believing, totally believing that God's going to put this fire out. And I'm like, you're right. In that moment, I had faltered thinking, well, maybe he wouldn't, maybe whatever. And it's like, no, pray believing for the outcome that I wanted is what I needed to do. And so I did. So I began praying, stronger, God, put it out. And it was incredible because he literally did. Like before the fire department could even get there, we watched the fire go out. And so obviously the firefighters still had to go in and had to take care of the hots and, check for hot spots to make sure that there's no flares and, all of those fiery technical things that they do. And, we're talking with the fire chief that's there and we're just like, oh my gosh, it was so incredible. God put out the fire, And the gentleman's telling us, no, it wasn't a miracle and it wasn't God that put out the fire. And we're like, it's out. We called you, big fire. Before you get here, fire gone. You know what I mean? Like, y'all didn't do it. It was God, And he says, no, there wasn't enough of a draft. He says, what it was is lack of oxygen, put the fire out. Okay, let's think about this for a second. Lack of oxygen. My husband literally opened the door. Now, mind you, he closed it, but there was, that poof of air that went in there as well. But besides that, in the peak of the house at both ends, there were windows that my father-in-law always kept open. No matter what the season was, no matter how cold it was, those two windows were always kept open to keep airflow going through there because, he cut wood and he stacked wood and that was all inside of there. But he had the wood-burning stove going. He had diesel equipment that he would run when he was working on in there and things like that. So he always kept it open. There was always a draft. And so we just kind of looked at this gentleman and we're like, let him believe what he wants to. We know what we experienced. We saw God put this fire out. Now, was there damage? Absolutely. But was it a total loss? No, not at all. And it was crazy because the garage part of it, it was full of plumbing and electrical equipment. It was full of stacks of wood, a tractor, there was so much stuff in there. And none of that was damaged. The home obviously dealt with smoke damage and, water damage where they came back in and worked on stuff, plus the things right there around the wood stove that had actually burned, the counter and the cabinets and things like that. But for the most part, most of it was smoke damage, that had rolled back, towards the back rooms and stuff like that. And the amount of heat that was in there, we had done laundry and he didn't have a dryer. But he had this clothesline that went down the hallway. So literally I had shirts that were hanging on hangers down this clothesline and the fire was so hot that it actually crisped the clothes. And when we touched them, they just fell apart, like all ashes and stuff. It was crazy. But anyways, I tell you all of this, and you're like, okay, wow, this is an interesting story. And, hooray that no one was harmed and, that the house was salvageable. But what I want to tell you all this story about is a few different things. First of all, there's a scripture that I feel like really goes along with it. And it's from Hebrews 4:16. Hebrews 4:16 says, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Again, that's Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying that, hey, if you just really strongly, pray to God, he's going to take whatever negative circumstance is happening and, it's going to stop and it's going to turn out the way you want it. I would have never wanted that fire to happen. But because that fire happened, it kind of changed a little bit of the direction that we were going. It kind of changed a few different things. It helped me in my reminder from my daughter to make sure that I prayed with confidence asking God specifically for something, because coming to him with confidence, knowing he's in control, knowing that he loves me no matter what, gives me the ability to be open to what he has for me. Along with that, because of that situation that night, standing outside, I think I forgot to, tell you this little part, 4 degrees below zero. We're standing outside screaming and crying, and our tears were literally freezing on our faces, and our noses was freezing. I mean, it was crazy. But we're out there screaming and crying and praying and believing. Inside of the truck was my mother-in-law, who was, I believe, in her 70s at that point. And when we got back with her and got inside and got a chance to talk, she said to me, I've never seen a miracle before. I've heard of miracles, but I've never seen one. And that was really crazy for me, because at that point, here I am, half her age. This was not my first miracle. I'd seen miracles because I've watched for them. I think that's one of the biggest things, is I believed my God could perform miracles, and I watched for them. And I still watch for them. I still believe he performs miracles all the time. So along with that, my husband's best friend was actually purchasing the house from us. With everything that happened, because of the damage that was in there, it had to get gutted out, which we helped him with and such. But then he was able to take that house that he wanted, and make it his own. Instead of it being a situation that he was purchasing it and feeling like he couldn't make changes because that was his best friend's dad's house, So it was kind of neat in how that one worked as well. It was crazy because the damage that was occurred in there was not anything that made us lose things of value to us. The stuff that burned, for the most part, was all replaceable, like kitchen cabinets and some dishes and whatever. It wasn't anything that had the special memories to it. So that was really amazing as well. So there's my story with that, a little bit about some of the trauma that we went through. Now the home, the house is definitely a home for my husband's friend. And, they're happy there, and that's great. And, it gave us something for us as a family to be able to, talk about later on and realize different things. And for me, it was a reminder that no matter how accustomed and familiar you are to things, for example, stacking a fire back up, stoking up the fire, throwing in kindling, things like that, it's always important to double check yourself when you're dealing with something that can be so dangerous. And so, since then, I'm definitely a lot more attentive when I do anything around fire. But it was also, for us, an opportunity to see God in action and to, realize that even when I make a mistake, that God can help me to see where my mistake was, but then he can also stop it from being something really traumatic. So I was so grateful for that one. So how can you take all of these things that I just shared in this story, and how can you relate that to getting through life right now? Because remember, this channel is about life strategies, and it's about how to be able to get through today, get through life as it is right now. And I think for one thing, one of the biggest strategies to remember is don't take what's happening at face value and step back and believe that that's all that there is. When we saw the house on fire, the house was on fire. There you go. That was the facts. That's what was there. That's what we saw. Everything was going to be gone. That's what we saw. There was a fire. We did the right thing. We called 911. We did the dangerous thing. We moved the truck out of there to save the truck so we could still sell that, okay? So, I wouldn't ever recommend for anybody to open a door and go into a fire unless you're a trained firefighter and that's what you have to do. But other than that, I'm not condoning that in any way. But besides calling the fire department and getting help there, the next thing we did was the only thing we could do, which was pray. If you're not a believer, or if your religion is different from mine, then I don't know how to recommend for you what to do, but you do know. What in that situation would you do and should you do? For us, we watched for the miracle and we believed in it and we saw it, and that was incredible. So in today's events, experiences, things that are going on, when you look at something and the first thing that you see perhaps is negative or is scary, don't stop there. Look a little deeper. Look and see what could change. How can you improve that situation? What could be done differently? Perhaps it's a situation where you have a conflict between you and a loved one, and your first thing is, you're automatically angry and it's all your, how you see things. Stop for a moment. Just stop. Take a breath. Look at it from their view. Or even try to step aside and just look at it from the outside, the whole thing. And determine, are you reacting out of fear or anger or whatever? Or are you actually responding to what's the underlying issue there? Many times, if we stop and step back and look at something, we can realize that our emotions were taking us one direction. But if we stop and look at things, we can change that direction. We can change the current. So I hope I've given you a little bit of encouragement. I hope that the story that I shared with you didn't dredge up anything painful or bad. If you've been through any fires, trust me, I get you. I hope it's a reminder to you that, fire is dangerous and to be cautious and careful with it. And, make sure you always double check yourself and make sure you always double check the things there. But anyways, I hope it was uplifting and I look forward to seeing you again. Please make sure that you hit like and that you subscribe so you can see what I'm going to talk about next time. And again, shoot me a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if there's something you'd like me to share with you. So I hope you have an incredible day and thank you again for joining me for Moments with Miss Amy.